In 2012, economists at the Federal Reserve realized that something very, very strange was happening in the United States. As it turns out, the unemployment data for the North American nation began to show very different figures from what, in theory, they were supposed to show. Check this out. In general, a country's unemployment rate is typically closer related to the number of job offers published by companies. In other words, if there are many job offers, the unemployment rate is normally very low, and the opposite is also true. If there is a crisis and companies suddenly stop offering jobs, the unemployment rate shoots up. So far, so logical, don't you think? Well, if we plot the US data up to 2008 in this graph, we will see that this relationship is perfectly represented. In fact, you can even draw a kind of curve that tells us, almost as if it were a perfect mathematical relationship, what percentage of the unemployment rate corresponds to what number of job offers. This relationship is known as the Beveridge curve. However, pay attention to what happened in the US starting in 2008. As you can see, all of a sudden, employment data stopped following the Beveridge curve pattern. From then on, despite the increase in job offers, the unemployment rate was still much higher than it should have been. Notice, for example, that in 2008, a percentage of job offers close to 3% was linked to an unemployment rate of only 5%. However, in 2012, that same volume of job offers went on to have an unemployment rate of more than 8%. The curve changed from the one shown on the screen to this one. In a way, this shift in the Beveridge curve implied that despite the increase in job offers, the unemployment rate was no longer able to return down to normal levels. It was as if something was preventing workers from accessing these new job offers. The question is, what was that something? What made it harder for the US to tackle unemployment, specifically after 2008? Could anybody remember anything big that happened in 2008? Well, among other important explanations, which by the way we'll delve into in a future video, the economists we mentioned earlier pointed out that part of the blame was due to unemployment benefits? As many of you already know, in 2008 there was a huge crisis that put many people out of work, the Great Financial Crash. And naturally, the US government did not want to stand by and watch people lose their income. That would be bad. This is why, starting in 2008, unemployment benefits in the US went from 26 weeks to 99 weeks. But what if I told you that in reality, this increase in subsidies could actually hurt more workers instead of helping them? Well, that's right. According to the economist's theory mentioned above, the increase in unemployment benefits actually caused many people to spend more time unemployed than they normally would have. Job seeking was, they say, discouraged. Many unemployed people were under the false assurance that the benefits would be there almost forever and did not take advantage of this time to find a job. As a result, despite the fact that there were many more job offers, workers simply didn't take them up. In short, it was almost as if unemployment benefits were completely counterproductive, a condemnation to unemployment and economic stagnation. However, beyond the theory of those few economists, what is the truth in all this? Is it possible, perhaps, that unemployment benefits could harm a country's economy? And if so, does it make sense to give public money to people for not working if we know that that might discourage them from looking for work? Well, the truth is that the answer is so much more complex than it may seem at first glance. So if you're interested in understanding why, pay close attention to what we're going to tell you in this video. Let's get cracking. What you are seeing on the screen is the result of a study that analysed the probability of finding a new job for the Spanish unemployed according to how long they had been out of work. During the first months after becoming unemployed, the Spanish people without work had a probability of finding a new job that hovered between 8 and 12% each month, a probability that also seemed to remain constant over time. So far, nothing seems significant. However, look at what happened as the 22nd month approached. Suddenly, almost magically, the unemployed began to find work much more easily than in the first few months. Specifically, the probability of finding a job after the 22nd month skyrocketed by almost 50%. So obviously, the question is, what was happening in month 22 that made it so much easier for the Spanish unemployed to suddenly find work? Well, the answer is that in that month 22, unemployment benefits run out. From that moment on, if the unemployed want to continue having an income, they need to look for a job. It was no longer enough for them to collect benefits and stay at home. In other words, this was proof that unemployment benefits were discouraging the Spanish unemployed for looking for work. When these benefits disappeared, the unemployed began to look for work much more intensely. So, the economist's theory that we explained at the beginning fitted with this real-life scenario. But take note, because this is not the end of the story. Another thing that the study discovered is that the unemployment benefits could be seriously manipulated by both companies and workers. Take a look at this. In the study's data sample, the researchers found that there were companies that rehired their former workers only a few months after firing them. And yes, to a certain extent, this might be normal, but what is not so normal is that right around the time when unemployment benefits run out, in month 22, companies are rehiring their former workers en masse. Specifically, the study indicated that a worker was 3 times more likely to return to his or her former employer when their unemployment benefits ran out than in the months before or after. In other words, a clear fraud of the system is taking place here. Many workers and companies agree to carry out layoffs so that the worker could collect unemployment benefits, and when those benefits ran out, the worker could legally return to the same place of work. And who knows, maybe in the meantime, that worker was still working off the clock, off the books, cash in hand. The thing is that in this way, the worker kept the job, but at the same time was able to fraudulently collect public money. In short, that at the time this study was carried out, unemployment benefits in Spain not only discouraged the search for work, so it would seem, but were also misused by companies committing clear fraud. However, can the results of this study be applied to other countries and other contexts, or is this a phenomenon exclusive to Spain? The truth is that the vast majority of the scientific evidence that you can see cited on the screen, both in different countries and in different years, point to the same conclusion. Basically, unemployment benefits increase unemployment. On this subject, there seems to be almost no doubt, in academic terms at least. The important thing is, does all this mean that unemployment benefits are useless? I mean, should we just get rid of them altogether? Well, and I'm not just saying this because I was once unemployed, let's not go so fast. Despite the fact that the unemployment benefits have a clear negative effect on the unemployment rate, there are good arguments in favor of maintaining them. And no, I'm not referring to the typical arguments of redistribution of wealth, not even of social justice, which we are all familiar with by now and should be common knowledge. I am referring to arguments of efficiency, productivity, and even economic prosperity. Do you want to know what arguments we're talking about? Of course you do. So let's find out.
Stop in order to run.
Let me ask you a question. Why is it that some people find it so hard to find a good job? And no, I don't just mean any old job. I mean a good job. Well, I'm sure there are all kinds of answers here, but without a doubt, we could give 2 reasons that most of us would probably agree on. The first is that some people are just unlucky. That is, it is possible that there are ideal job offers for a person, but perhaps those offers are not in reach of his or her ears. Maybe he lives in a different place. Maybe they're not commutable. Let's just say that the conditions are not always in place for the ideal worker to find his or her ideal job. I mean, come on. It's a little bit like falling in love. Most likely, we all have the love of our lives waiting for us, but sometimes we just don't get the chance to meet him or her, and we have to spend a while waiting until that special someone arrives. I should know, I've been waiting a very long time. Beyond that though, another reason that may explain why some people don't find good jobs is because there simply aren't any good jobs suited to their profession. In other words, there may be many good jobs for, say programmers, but if all the unemployed people are plumbers who do not know how to program, then those job offers aren't much use, are they? In any case, the interesting thing about all this is that assistance for the unemployed can favor the creation of good jobs, both in cases of bad luck and in cases where there are no jobs adapted to the experience of the workers at hand. I mean, think about it this way. If a worker has bad luck in finding a good job, then with unemployment benefits, he or she has more time to wait for that ideal offer that we've been talking about. In addition, this aid puts an end to the obligation to accept the first offer that comes along in order to put food on the table, regardless of the conditions. And it ultimately gives the individual more negotiating leeway to ask for higher wages. But what happens in cases where it is not luck that fails, but professional experience, in cases such as the programmers and the plumbers? In that case, unemployment benefits can provide a large margin of time and resources for workers to study, train, and get skills for working in new sectors. That, at least, is the theory. The key to all that I have just told you is good for 2 reasons. The first is that if people accept jobs, the country's productivity will tend to grow, but keep in mind, not only will productivity increase, but as wages will be higher, workers will end up paying more taxes, and in the end, the cost of the unemployment benefits will be more than reimbursed. Although yes, I know what many of you are thinking. All this as a theory, as a best case scenario, it's all very well, but what really happens in practice? Is there any evidence that everything we have just outlined actually happens? Well, let's take a look.
A matter of perspective?
In 1989, in Austria, the government changed the unemployment benefits system. This change allowed the unemployed over 40 years of age to receive 9 weeks of benefits more than the regular unemployed. The curious thing is that this made it possible to compare how the salaries of people affected by these longer-lasting benefits changed compared to those who were not able to enjoy them. And that is exactly what economists Enquiries and Weber studied. What they found, as you see on the screen, was that the extension of unemployment benefits served to increase the future wages of these people by about 0.5%. Not only that, but they also found that workers ended up working in larger, more competitive companies with better conditions beyond wages. In other words, as the theory predicted, more generous unemployment benefits served to improve the country's productivity and wages. Not much, it's true, only 0.5%, but economists compared the cost of the measure against the benefits and concluded that the benefits won handsomely. Just a moment, however, because that is not the end of the story. The same study compiled the results of other similar studies in various countries in different situations and put them all together in the same graph. And look what happened then. Most of the other studies found completely opposite effects to the Austrian case. Unemployment benefits not only failed to improve wages, but actually reduced them. So the question is, why did these other studies find different results? Which of them is right? Well, the truth is, and this is super interesting, is that all of them are right. And the fact is that in the matter of unemployment benefits and their effect on wages, things can vary a lot depending on the context, as you can see here. As we have said, the longer a person is able to be on assistance, the more selective he or she can be, and also the more room he or she will have to study and adapt for better job offers, which will ultimately increase wages. However, something that is not often taken into account is that the longer a person is unemployed, the more likely it is that he or she will lose his or her work rhythm, that his or her knowledge will decay, that he or she will lose motivation to work, or that companies will be more afraid to hire that person because they have been unemployed for so long. This will lead to increasingly poorer job opportunities. So if unemployment benefits are excessive, then the second factor will be greater than the first, and therefore wages will end up falling. This is exactly why, in the case of Austria, an increase in the duration of benefits was able to increase wages, while in other cases, the opposite was true. Austria is one of the developed countries with the lowest unemployment benefits of all. And let's just say that despite the increase in unemployment benefits, they remained too low for the negative effects to begin to manifest themselves. For the same reason as in the rest of the countries, the subsidies were paid over a longer period, and we are talking about subsidies that even exceeded 2 years, as extending them even further ended up being counterproductive. But if we know that in most countries unemployment aid is excessive and that it can not only create more unemployment than necessary, but also reduce salaries, how can we reduce benefits without generating social problems? How can we find the exact duration so that everything runs as smoothly as possible? Well, actually, there was one country that carried out a reform of its unemployment system that was very, very effective. Do you want to know what country we're talking about? Of course you do. So check this out.
Aligning incentives.
After the great financial crash of 2008, the European Commission recommended to several European countries that in order to combat unemployment and reduce public deficits, they should reform and cut their unemployment benefit systems. And do you know one of those countries that reformed its system? Indeed, it was one of the countries that suffered the most from the effects of the crisis. It was Spain. And take note, because unlike all the studies we have mentioned above, in the case of Spain, aid money was not simply cut, nor was its duration reduced. The interesting thing about this reform is that it only applied after 6 months of unemployment. In other words, if you became unemployed, you would receive the same amount of money during the first 6 months as you would have before the reform. But after that half a year, you were still unemployed, then the amount of money received would drop to 17% less than it was before the reform. And the truth is that this was a very good idea for 2 reasons. Firstly, by continuing to provide generous benefits during the first 6 months of unemployment, workers still had time and resources to access better job offers. And secondly, because if they went over the time limit, the cut after half a year discouraged them from remaining unemployed for much longer, which, as we have shown above, could have counterproductive effects. And what were the results, you might ask? Well, they were as follows. Since the reform, the chances of finding a job for the Spanish unemployed increased by 41%. That's right, 41% more chances of finding a job. In fact, people affected by the reform found many more jobs even before the arrival of the 6th-month drop in payments. In a sense, the unemployed anticipated the drop in income and had much more incentive to look for work than before the reform. Now, what happened to wages? Did this reform force the unemployed to accept miserable jobs? Well, no, far from it. This study shows that after the cut in subsidies, wages remained unchanged. What's more, other variables such as the duration of contracts or the number of hours worked were not affected either. But is that not enough for you? Another thing the researchers found was that as people found work faster, and also with the reduced post-6-month benefits, the cost to the state of unemployment benefits was also massively reduced. To give you an idea, every year Spain had been spending an average of 20 billion euros per year, but thanks to this measure, more than 3 billion euros per year were saved. In other words, the equivalent of building 20 hospitals like this one every single year. As you can see, the unemployment reform in Spain was a real success. The reform combined the benefits of the unemployment payment system during the first months while being able to counteract the negative effects in the following months. Be that as it may, could there be other more conservative solutions, a less confrontational solution, for example, that does not involve making controversial cuts? Well, the truth is, yes, and several economists have proposed alternatives such as adjusting subsidies to the real needs of each person. Or, instead of giving direct aid and money that could be spent for things that are not basic needs, one could give social vouchers to subsidize rent or food, like they do in the US with food stamps. Whatever the case, this is the subject for another video. What's really important about this one are the conclusions that we can draw from everything that we've told you so far. The first is that overly generous unemployment benefits tend to increase unemployment and reduce both wages and productivity. In other words, they can be counterproductive. And the second is that, despite this, there are very good arguments in favor of maintaining this type of aid, which, as is the case with Austria, can be beneficial for everyone. And the third is that reform that favor the positive effects of this aid, aligning incentives and limiting the negative effects, could be a great idea for most developed countries. In any case, at this point, it is over to all of you. How do you think the unemployed should be helped? Do you think that the ideal is a public system that controls the negative effects, or perhaps a private system that shields the state from problems might be better? Do you know of a personal case of fraud or cases where the aid has been really useful for a person? You can leave us your answers in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video, please like it so we know. If you don't want to miss the next ones, please give us a thumbs up and click on the little bell button down there so you don't miss any of our updates. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I'll see you next time.